Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. We are about to embark on a new chapter in the history of our school, and it seemed appropriate to begin this in a really simple way, just gathering around together to hear a story. 20 years ago, I moved out here from a 150-year-old boarding school that had attics and belfries and dusty corners and lots of stories. And they used to draw upon the history of the school and its stories to give meaning and richness to our life together as a community. I looked to those stories for direction and inspiration. And I was worried about starting a school that was still in negative numbers. There were no stories to tell. There was no rich fabric of experience to draw upon. And it turns out that that was a really silly fear, along with a million silly fears I've had in my life. And it was silly because history and stories just spin themselves out of our moment to moment community experiences. And before too long, we had many stories that began with some version of in the beginning. And then there was a whole set of chapters that start with back at the old campus. And then on and on. And before too long, of course, our students became our stories. And then, of course, our students had amazing stories of their own to tell. Now, starting a school is a pretty compelling story with challenges and surprises and plot twists like this one that we never could have dreamed up. And we know that we will all have a lot of stories to tell about this time in our school's life and in our own lives. Certainly, when we were dreaming up the school, we never could have dreamed up Brandon Spars. How could we have imagined this larger than life, brilliant teacher who would animate his classes, his history and literature classes with amazing stories? And long ago, I gave up trying to decide which parts of his stories were true and which may have been fictions of some sort. It didn't matter. But you should know that at the beginning, Brandon did not always weave his stories into his classes. He wasn't at all certain that they belonged there, which is really hard to imagine now. But then he spoke to another teacher, a teacher coach who has worked with our teachers for many years. And she said, "You have to teach who you are." Uh, and so that changed. And this is the authentic nature of Sonoma Academy, and it is the great gift of our school, I believe. Brandon is a regular Bay Area storyteller, a TEDx speaker, 5-time champion of the Moth Story Slam, and has 2 Grand Slam titles at West Side Stories in Petaluma. But we claim him as our very own. And Brandon, thank you so much for being willing to do this, to bring us together tonight before we get going on this next chapter in our school's history.
Let me clear something up. None of my stories are fiction. They are all true. And today I'm going to just be telling you a story about how I came to be a teacher, how I came to be sitting right here in front of you. In college, this is about 30 years ago, I had a beautiful girlfriend. She was 6'2". She was a runway model. I was sure I was in love. But in reality, she just had me wrapped around her little finger. Now, going to parties And bars with a woman like that was very difficult. Men came from every direction. And to give you a sense of this, at a Billy Idol concert, the rebel rocker himself, Billy Idol, selected her out of the thousands present, plucked her up onto the stage with him, and I didn't see her until 4.5 hours after the concert had ended. Now, car rides home on evenings like this, I would be in a sullen mood. But her mood would have been completely brightened by the attention she received from men such as Billy Idol. And then when we got home, she could totally diffuse me by tumbling in my lap, tickling me, and insisting, "You're not mad. Nothing happened." Well, after we graduated from college, she decided she wanted to travel the world teaching English for a volunteer organization. So naturally, I signed up too. But whereas she received a glamorous post in the cosmopolitan city of Jakarta, I can't even show you on a map where they posted me. Somewhere deep in the jungles of Sumatra, where I would be teaching English to a recently settled nomadic forest group. After I said goodbye to her in Jakarta, I made the 3-day journey out into the jungles of Sumatra. And when I arrived at the village where I was stationed, it appeared to be completely abandoned, all except for a single stooped, very old man. "Hello, I love you," he said, which is really strange. How does a unit of English comprised of 4 words jammed together make it deep into the jungles of Sumatra? "Hello," I corrected him. "Just hello." It obviously was the only English that he spoke. "Hello, I love you," he repeated. "Right, whatever. Where are all the people?" I asked. And then he said something in Indonesian I'll never forget. "Mereka lagi di hutan berburu monyet." They, again, the forest to hunt the monkey. When will they be back? I asked. He thought. "Maybe tomorrow." Well, this maybe tomorrow turned into more than 2 months, and still the only one I had seen from that village was that old man. I didn't care. I hadn't gone there to teach. I had gone there to love my girlfriend. And I spent my days locked in the empty classroom, composing beautiful love letters to her, with creative fantasies about our future together, full of erotic scenarios. I took to writing about different parts of her body, her hair, her eyes, her lips, all the obvious ones. And then I began to turn to those that were lesser known. In one letter, I wrote, "How I long to dust with kisses the milky white skin of your elbows." Whether her elbows, her lips, her eyes, her hair, my standard closing was always, "Oh, babe, you hold my beating heart in the palms of your hands." Once every week or so, a man with a horse would arrive. This was the Indonesian post office, and it was to him that I gave my letters, 10, 20 at a time. But in all of my time there, I never got a single letter back. The old man was completely in charge of my well-being. He cooked every meal for me. He washed my clothes. Every afternoon, he would take me out for walks into the rainforest, during which I would gather all these colorful flowers, press them, and send them off in the mail to my girlfriend for effect. Once, I became extremely ill with a high fever. I don't know how many days I was sick, but that old man never left my side. He tended to me. He nursed me back to health. And when I was strong again, that was when I decided I had to leave. I packed my bag and I went to the old man and I told him, "Look, I'm lonely and depressed. There are no students here. And there seems to be something wrong with the Indonesian post office because I really should have been receiving some letters at this point." And then I turned to go find her in Jakarta. Hello, I love you, he said. And I turned back around. Hello, I love you, I said to him. And by that, I meant goodbye. Of course, it dawned on me how much in debt I was to this old man. But what surprised me was how sad he seemed. That was my dog. How sad he seemed. Tears were streaming down his face. And I realized how lonely he must be in this village all by himself, and what my presence must have meant to him. At the flat in Jakarta, where I had been sending my countless expressions of undying love, to my surprise, a large, red-faced man answered the door. Is my girlfriend here? I asked. Huh? No, said the man and slammed the door in my face. Well, I hadn't traveled 3 days to be turned around that easily, so I knocked again, and this time I held up one of my letters. Is my girlfriend here? I asked, and I pointed at her name. His eyes widened in obvious recognition. Oh, 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 and he ushered me into his house. He summoned his 2 daughters, Mei Mei and Fufu, who presumably spoke some English. And when they found out I was the one that had been bombarding their house with these countless expressions of undying love, they squealed with delight. And one of them shot off and came back with a sack full of my writing. In a feat of optimism, I kept hoping that they would produce my girlfriend, that she was somehow now living with this family. But when the girls dumped my writing on the coffee table and began reading parts out loud that they had underlined, I began to grow a little despondent. One of them read, "Oh, Baba, you hold my beating heart in the palms of your hands," to which the other replied, "How I long to dust with kisses the Milky Way," and she couldn't even finish. This was obviously a familiar routine around this household. What better way to practice English than reading someone else's love letters? Well, it was the father who eventually took pity on me, and he phoned the landlord and found out that, yes, before their family had moved in, my girlfriend had been there for about a week. But then she had left the country with a Greek man. Now, she had forgotten to do 2 things. She had forgotten to tell me she was leaving the country, and she had forgotten to break up with me. I had been sitting in the middle of the jungle for 2.5 months, writing letters to a girlfriend that existed for the most part only in my imagination. Ooh, she held my beating heart in the palms of her hands, but instead of cherishing it, honoring it, my devotion, my blind, naive devotion, instead of cherishing her, she took it and ripped it out of my chest. Oh, it hurt. Still does a little bit. When I left that house, holding my heart, holding my sack of open letters, I had a decision to make. And I think it was because of her disloyalty that I decided to be loyal and honor the contract that I had signed for that post in the job. I think it was because of her disloyalty that I decided I would be loyal. And the only person in the world at that particular moment I had to be loyal to was that old man in the jungle. And it was to him that I returned. I spent every day for the next 2.5 months with that man. I still went to the empty classroom, but instead of writing letters to a girlfriend that didn't really exist except for my imagination, I began to write out lesson plans. I began to try to imagine what it would be like to be a teacher. I still took walks every afternoon with that old man, and he still brought me colorful flowers. But instead of sending them off in the mail to my girlfriend, I gave them names: Alex, Miles, Mira, Avery, Lael. I placed them in chairs, and they became my imaginary students: Ryan and Ryan, Jillian, Dylan, Chuck. Finally, one day, the man with a horse arrived, and there was a letter for me. It was from my organization. Based on a report that I had sent, they were closing this position in the jungle of Sumatra, and they were transferring me to a teaching position on the island of Bali. And so, for a second time, I had to say goodbye to that old man. May surprise you, I never heard from that girlfriend again. But I still, from time to time, sit down and write a letter out by hand. I've written about how in Bali, I met a girl, a Balinese girl, fell in love, and got married. And I've written about how when we moved to the United States, each one of those flowers actually became a real student. Astrid and Theo, May, Marcus, Christian, Eli, Luke, Izzy, Francesca, because I ultimately became a high school teacher. Of course, I've written about my two beautiful children of my own. And these letters are sent across the Pacific Ocean, where I suppose a man with a horse still picks them up and carries them deep into the jungles of Sumatra to a village where once, at least a long time ago, there lived an old man. I don't know if that old man is still there, but I will never stop writing. I've never received an answer back. I've signed every one of those letters. Hello, I love you. Now, this was a story about love, the love of physical attraction at the beginning, but of course, the discovery of deeper kinds of love too. The love of a marriage, the love of one's children, the love of deep friendship, which the old man taught to me. But there's also another kind of love that begins in this story, and that is the love of a teacher for their students. I was truly lucky that each one of those flowers did become a real student. All of you out there. And I'm speaking for all of your teachers at Sonoma Academy when I say, we are here for you. We will get through this. We'll make the best of it. We can't wait to see you again, face to face. And finally, we love you. Now, I know Janet Durgan has a few other things she wants to say, but I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I'll see you all very soon on Zoom and hopefully in person. Janet?
Brandon, we love you. Thank you for reminding us how really simple it is. Within the course of 12 minutes, tears and laughter and gratitude to be part of this community, and that you are part of this community. I can't think of a better way to have launched what this next unknown that we're going into. But just with this simple connection and your reminder of love, because that's certainly why we're here and why we're doing this. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I know we have some new families who've been with us this evening. So happy you could join us. And to all of our students, I can hardly wait to see you tomorrow. And school will begin at 9 a.m. Darren is actually behind the scenes making all this happen. So Darren, I guess we're signing off for tonight. Thanks for your help too. Good night.